All right, everyone, we're live.
Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have a quorum. This is a special meeting of the Board of Education, February 24th. We have one agenda item this evening to discuss the superintendent's recommendations for the mask in school policy post February 28th. So if I kind of step back a little bit, on the 15th at our regular monthly meeting, the superintendent discussed her initial recommendations. There was a couple of housekeeping things we did. We actually repealed one of our policies around the mask mandate that really was appropriate once because the state mandate on mask in schools was in place. Given that was going to change post February 28th. We repealed that policy and we put another policy in place for the administration and the superintendent to develop the health and safety protocols related to COVID-19, consistent with applicable laws, rules, and regulations and requirements, but we didn't know what those laws, rules, regulations, and requirements were. And so now that we do, we committed to having a special meeting so that the superintendent could go through the final recommendations and we'd have an opportunity to ask questions, discuss, just to make sure that everyone is comfortable, that that all of our questions and concerns are answered and taken on board before the 28th. So I'm going to hand it off to Lisa, who will really go through the highlights of what she actually sent to the parent community during the week, and then open it up to discussion and questions from the board. All right, Lisa, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Tony. Good evening. Many of you are aware, hopefully you've all received my February 23rd communication. And I want to thank everyone in the community for their patience. It took a little bit of time to review everything, kind of digest everything and organize it for the community. There is a great deal of information in this letter. And I am now an expert, thanks to Jody Saketa, of putting links in the letter to make sure that everyone can easily link to different policies and documents and everything that sort of align with our approach. So basically, the most important part that was bolded in the letter was that starting on Monday, February 28th, all students pre-K through grade 12 and staff will not be required to wear a mask in school. And as Tony said, that was my recommendation. There were several things that happened at the February 15th board meeting that was summarized in the letter about different policies and the repealing of the face covering policy and the new policy that, again, there's a link in the letter. That is the direction that we are moving in. Now, there were two key documents we had been awaiting. I believe I said in one of my other February letters that we were waiting for guidance from the state. And so there were two documents that are now referenced, again, in links in my letter. One is called the Transitioning to a Model of Routine Respiratory Disease Prevention and Enhanced Outbreak Management and Control for COVID-19 in pre-K-12 school settings. That certainly is a mouthful, and it's aligns with our approach. And then the other one is that the Connecticut Department of Public Health had specific considerations that they wanted boards of education and district administrators and local decision makers to, reflect upon regarding potential changes to policies and practices. So if I may, some of the highlights. One of the things that in preparation for Monday that we are happy to report is that the district is receiving more supplies of testing kits from the state, and that the state actually had recommended that all students and staff test themselves actually the morning of February 28th, that Monday, before coming to school in anticipation of this change. I'm pleased to report that although the shipment from the state has been delayed until next week due to the impending weather, I see Phil smiling, we were managed with the first 2 shipments to find enough tests. They were given out today, correct principles, all the tests were given out. They were sent home in backpacks. The Miss Gavoni and company were out early this morning, handing them to our high schoolers, which was the easiest test that they were going to have to take, taking the boxes, and you can see a picture on our Instagram. So all the tests were distributed. We have enough for all of the staff. And so I think that that's an important proactive measure. The good thing is that with this other new shipment of, I think it's something like several thousand more tests, that we are really in good shape to continue to monitor this. The other highlight is that as we're moving forward, there are some other practices specifically about visitors that we will be reviewing. But our first step is really to provide the choice for students and staff and to move forward with that. And then there'll be a later communication, for example, about people are saying, well, can we visit the school now? All in due time. But parents that are listening, please know that you will have the option in those, I know those K-5 spring conferences, right, Ms. Falber and Ms. Kadis, that if they want an in-person option, that's I know that's on a lot of people's minds. So that's available. Masks still are required on school buses, and that has to do with the federal law. There's the link in the letter that requires that. And so that's really our main focus as far as vigilance and making sure staff monitoring the students as they are going in and out of the buses. One thing I think it's important to note, and we really need the family's help with this, is if your child is riding a bus or taking a bus home in the afternoon, because sometimes children get dropped off in the morning for different lessons. I see Patty shaking her head. And then in the afternoon, they really need to have those masks. While we have masks and we will make sure that everyone has one when boarding, it would be of great help to us to ensure that your child has a mask for that transportation. We do anticipate that will change over the next couple of months. We aren't sure, but as soon as we hear that that mask is no longer required on the bus, we will let you know. And I think it's important to note that the bus driver has to keep his eyes on the bus and the road, and that they are not in positions to monitor someone that might, a child that might lower the mask or whatnot. So we just have to keep reinforcing those efforts with our children that take the bus. Also in the letter, if you want to reference, there's a lot about the state laws and the permissions and all of that, which while it's important, because it kind of provides the framework under which we are moving in this new direction. So, as you know, the state legislature passed, Governor Lamont signed into law this special act. And this new law also provided the commissioners of education and early childhood, in consultation with the Commissioner of Public Health, to issue guidance and rules for the operation of schools in response to the pandemic through June 30th. It also permits them to rescind the statewide mask requirement in schools. And that's what we are eagerly awaiting. We anticipate that to happen very shortly, probably tomorrow. The other thing that it's important to note is that they obviously have indicated the intent for the universal mask mandate to be eliminated. The Connecticut Office of Early Childhood will also no longer mandate mask wearing effective February 28th as well. Now, it should be noted that the OEC, the Office of Early Childhood, continues to recommend that our preschoolers who cannot be vaccinated wear masks. However, it is no longer a mandate. We will also not be making it a mandate, but a recommendation. I know that there was some concern with the preschool parents, and I certainly understand that, as does Ms. Cadis. We have, I believe it's 33 students total in our preschool program across 3 classes, correct, Ms. Cadis? And and they all go outside to recess. There's plenty of fresh air. And we also have in those particular classrooms put in larger HEPA filters, just as an added mitigation strategy. Correct, Mr. Cross? Thank you. Based on really the fact that the elimination of the universal mask mandate and the vaccination rates in the community, the infection rates, we are monitoring them very closely. We are moving in this direction. There is guidance from the DPH, which is in one of those documents. And if you look at the document in the link, there are different recommendations that they have given us that we are continually following. We are recommending COVID-19 vaccinations. We had another vaccine clinic this week. We will continue to offer them in partnership with Griffin Hospital as needed. We are following the isolation guidelines, and those are the guidelines recommended by the CDC. We are supporting students and staff who wish to wear a mask. And I think part of that is that, especially with little children, there are times where we still have to wear masks, for example, on the school bus. And so having the students, which were the administrators at the elementary schools, sort of recommendation that I think is very important, or practice that we're going to do, is to have those children put on their masks if they're taking the bus in the classroom, correct, Ms. Falber, and then go and get on the bus. And that itself sends the message that there are times where you have to wear a mask. And if your friend is choosing to wear a mask the entire time during the day, and your teacher is, then that's okay, and it should be respected and honored. It's also, quite frankly, easier to make sure the children have the masks on before they go down and line up and get them on the buses. So that's something that we're going to be doing. We are continuing to obviously update the district dashboard. On the district dashboard, thanks to Ms. Saketa, there is also a link right to the town site that is linked from the state, which reports on percentages of vaccination rates. We have distributed our test kits. We are continuing to offer voluntary testing for all students, including pre-K, regardless of vaccination status. That takes place on, I believe, is it Monday? Is that correct? Yes, Monday. Thank you. I see the principals shaking their head. Sometimes they're so flexible that they come, like if we're off on Monday, they will try to arrange on Tuesday. So I have to say they're really on top of their game, the group that comes. If you are wanting that service, it's clearly voluntary. Parents can register on the parent portal of Power School. You can also notify the school nurse if you don't want to continue it anymore. It's a very flexible program. And for some, it really adds another layer of comfortability and reassurance about what's going on in the school. The other important thing is that, and one of the recommendations is, and I want to be very clear on this to the point where I'm going to read it, in the event of an increase in the infection rates or other signs of possible surges in the community, the district will work with the local public health officials and medical advisor to implement any other needed strategies, including circumstances in which individuals in a school, a class, or across the district, which we certainly don't hope happens, may be required to wear a mask again. We are committed to monitoring this very closely. We meet with the local health officials, and it should be noted that our board chair and our vice chair, Tony and Melissa, are joining those meetings every week. Our nursing supervisor is on the call, as well as Mr. Cross and Tracy Edwards. So that's really important to check in with them, to see what they're seeing. Dr. Marks is a great resource to be able to ask about, what are you seeing in your colleagues in your practice, if there are any spikes and things like that. So we are on top of that. The considerations in my letter, it says considerations for the Weston school community. Every one of the bullets was a consideration that was provided to us as guidance from the state. And it was the idea of reviewing those data points. We are reviewing them. Balancing the balance of risk of increases in infection, quarantine, and isolation. We're looking at that very carefully. The current COVID vaccine status of students and staff. And I have the figure now for staff. I'm sorry I didn't include it in the letter. 95% of our staff is vaccinated, which is really terrific. So that I know that some parents had actually emailed wondering what was the statistics, and I was able to confirm with our HR manager. The vaccine, again, the clinics were offering. This is an important part. The consideration is about how to plan to address the needs of students and staff who may be at a greater risk for adverse health outcomes. Basically, any families that have medically fragile or immunocompromised students who are at risk for severe outcomes if they become infected with COVID-19 should first contact the building assistant principal, and at the high school, it's Mr. Phillip, who sort of serves as the administrator liaison. And we would look under accommodations under 504, IDEA, or ADA to work with that family. That also includes if there is a situation within the home that we need to look at. We have a process, we have had a process. Basically, the COVID liaison administrator will talk with the parent, and then if it is needed to request an exemption to be able to go to remote learning, there is a process for that, and it goes to the director of pupil services, Ms. Edwards. So that I think is important. Lastly, I want to speak a little bit to about how to provide students and staff to assist them as far as, they're making personal decisions regarding mask wearing. Giving parents data and then letting them choose, I think, is very important based on that data. And again, it's a fluid process. The one thing that we need to understand is that if a parent wishes for their child to remain masked during the school day, it will be extremely difficult for our staff to monitor that within the classroom. And that's, again, where we need our families' help. We will be supportive. We will create an environment within the classroom and within the school that supports this. However, keeping track of them and throughout the day and enforcing that is something that is really beyond our capability at this point. Now, that being said, we have done work proactively this week to ensure that the students understand that we have clear expectations, that we have different systems, as I spoke to, class charters that they've written, morning meetings, school rules. Administrators have reached out, and I'm going to pause right now if any of them want to share any particular thing that they did in their buildings to speak to that point.
Lisa, I'd be happy to share what we did at the middle school. And I sent a communication out to our families as well, explaining that we, Mr. Walters, the assistant principal, and I spoke to all of the students during their lunch waves about our expectations, about being respectful. We also made posters that will be throughout in the rooms and in the hallways, just reminding people of the need to be respectful of families and their decisions and privacy related to reasoning why they should choose to mask or not mask, as well as vaccination status.
Thank you. Ms. Cavoni, I believe you sent out a communication also.
It's scheduled to be sent. It kind of depends what's happening with the weather tomorrow. I'm hoping to be able to address the students live, but I have also made a recorded video message to send out in the event that we are not in tomorrow. We did have a full staff meeting in person today as well to reiterate those messages with the staff. Again, about respecting personal choice and promoting a kind and respectful environment always, as in all things.
Exactly. And the elementary schools, I know it's a little bit different because they're little children. We don't want to raise the anxiety amongst, 4 and 5-year-olds or 8 and 9-year-olds. But principals, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Yeah, I mean, we sent a note home to parents as well today, and then we had a faculty meeting this afternoon with our teachers to really make sure that they feel comfortable in being able to support our students and really reinforce that positive, warm climate. And the same thing, it's like if one student wears glasses and another student doesn't need glasses, so just sort of have the, going back to our charter, going back to our school pride rules. So, and the teachers were very on board.
That's a great analogy, Patty. That's a great analogy. Some have glasses, some don't. Some have, take medicine at noon, some don't. Like, I love that.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we're doing the same at Pearl, but we work on this every day because of the age of our children: kindness, differences, acceptance, our class charters, how we want to feel when we're in school and in our classrooms. Mr. Paler and I were touching base with all the classroom teachers, just going in and out of every classroom. Students are starting to maybe bring it up as a topic, and our teachers are very well equipped to handle this. We practice responsive classroom, positive responses, and the teachers are very skilled at guiding those conversations. We really do not anticipate any challenges, especially at the early elementary level. Children are very much rule followers. So if their parents tell them to do something, most of the time they do it. Same thing with the teachers. And it's just as Patty said, for us, it's no different than I have a hat on today, you don't. I wear glasses, you don't. We've worked very hard on building a very positive, inclusive learning environment where everybody is accepted for who they are. And it's funny because even at the very young age, you hear children say that, like, it's okay. Like, I had one little girl say to me, "You do you." And I was like, okay. So it's, these conversations with young children, they're ongoing. And we really don't want, as Lisa said, make this a really big to-do, because by doing that with young children, you do raise the anxiety level. Like, oh my gosh, now should I be worried about this? I really wasn't before. But wait a minute, is this a big deal? And it really isn't. Children have been wearing masks for 2 years. Some are going to have them on, some aren't. And, I'm talking to a lot of families too. I think we're really going to see a mix, and we really don't anticipate a lot of challenges. And our teachers are already having those conversations, and they're ready to guide our students through that.
There was also a communication you guys sent out recently about recess, correct? Perhaps not all the board, if they don't have elementary children, know about that. If you could share that.
Yes. So February the 22nd was a very exciting day. It was Tuesday for number 2 because it was 2/22/22. A lot of fun at the elementary level. Any day like that is just, it's so exciting. So we took the opportunity to build on that. And then playing on the word 2, we combined 2 classes for recess, and starting to move towards grouping students outdoors so they can make, new friends, more friends, revisit prior friends. So we kicked that off, and it was a wonderful day. It also happened to be an absolutely gorgeous day outside. So it was a lot of fun. And again, we didn't make a big deal about it. We're going to be meeting new friends today, and it went very smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
And we did the same. We had all the classes. We have 2 classes at a time now, which is really nice because we don't have a really big playground area. So we're not over at the track, or we're not in the parking lot. We actually can stay in our little area, and it was really nice. And we had a great Tuesday as well. We did the whole school, did an all school Cupid shuffle dance in the hallway. It was really fun. We stopped everything and danced.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I went over there and I saw Mr. Broad in a tutu, I didn't make the connection. I'm still not used to these elementary celebrations. And then Oh, we wore tutus. It's Tuesday. Okay, fine. Then I go to Hurlbut and it's like, why do these women all have their hair done in bizarre ways, like Whoville, like all in two bizarre braids? And it took me about, after seeing 3 different people, and then a little boy had a shirt on. I said, I get it now. So yeah, it was, I mean, if anyone can calm little children down, I tell you, the staff at Hurlbut and WIS can. So I think that all is really important. In a way, having the threat of a cancellation tomorrow, if I dare say that, although we are really hoping just for the delay, has sort of primed the pump for us this week to make sure that we got every test kit out we could. We made sure that the faculty had meetings and touch base at all the schools. I also sent a communication out to the district staff, and I'm a pretty direct person. So in it, I give some very specific examples, because sometimes we as adults forget the unintended consequence of our words. And so I spoke to, like, for example, if I say to you, oh, Patty, finally, I'm so happy to see that beautiful smile, and Tony is standing right next to her in a mask, that can be really uncomfortable for Tony. So let's not do that. Or you might make a comment like, you can't ask people to, could you please put your mask on when you come up to my table? You can't ask a child to do that. Like, you can wear your mask if you need some other protection or shield. We can do certain things to accommodate you, but I think it's just important to be really direct and clear that this is the expectation, as well as when adults gather, because I worry, I do not want any adult to feel uncomfortable if someone is sharing his or her personal preference in the staff lounge. And people, we've all kind of seen it happen. I've even put my foot in my mouth sometimes. We need to be extra sensitive as we make this transition, because it really gets to the very core of how people are caring for themselves and how people are caring for their most precious, precious little children. Even those 18-year-olds at the high school, when I look at them, I think of what they must have looked like when they were at Hurlbut. I mean, we really have to make sure that we are taking care of each and every child, as well as each and every staff member. So at this point, I would entertain any questions that you may have, or if there's any other things that we can clarify. I know that there is still like, well, what would the metrics be if we were to have to put masks back on, and what's the tipping point? I'll be frank, we don't know all those specific details right now. However, we are following it. I'm following it on a daily basis. Yeah. And our constant communication and monitoring, I think it's the most important thing is what's going on in the Weston community, what's going on in our neighbors in Westport, for example. All that is really important.
Yeah. Lisa, I think that the one thing, oh, I'm sorry, Laura, go ahead.
That's okay. I was just going to give one more example of kind of the preparation leading up to this. I think our students have already had practice with masks, no mask, because even outside, sometimes we do have children who choose to keep their masks on outdoors. Mm-hmm. It's been a pretty cold winter, so sometimes it's just to keep themselves warm. So even at outdoor recess, some masks, some no masks. So, and it really did not, some people might have said like, oh, are you keeping your mask on outside? And they're like, yeah, I'm a little cold. Okay. Sometimes they might ask, and it's just a matter of fact, like, yeah, I am. Okay. So I think they have had some experiences around that. It's not going to be a total, I think some people are anticipating a bigger issue than there might be. I just wanted to give that an example.
Yeah. Well said. I mean, I feel like the younger children, well, it's the way we started foreign language in the elementary schools. I know it all relates back to Spanish because that's when they feel the most comfortable. I don't think about talking or seeing things and this and that. It's as they move up, and it gets a little bit more challenging, especially, frankly, at the middle school age, where they see more differences, if you will. And so I really appreciate that you took, those extra efforts, Mr. Doak, especially at that level.
Lisa, I wanted to kind of follow that thread about, how do we stay on top of things? I think that weekly meeting that we have, I'm in it, Melissa, yourself, our medical advisor, the health district, Mark Cooper's in it, all the assistant principals are in it. that's a great meeting from which to actually get an assessment of how we're doing in the school community, how we're doing in Weston and the surrounding areas, and also what the pediatricians are seeing in their practices. Like, for example, this week, our medical advisor said, you know, she's not seeing COVID, but she's seeing a lot of stomach viruses. She's seeing a lot of respiratory, like the normal. She said, I'm seeing kind of the normal stuff that I usually see, right? And so that's a good, you know, I think that's a good piece of information, because she's saying, you know, look out, once the mask comes off, you may see a lot of absenteeism, not COVID related, but related to, you know, a lot of the things that she may be seeing, or a lot of the other pediatricians are seeing in the surrounding communities. So I think that weekly meeting is going to be an important point from which then to inform us as to how we're doing in terms of whether we need to do something different or not, right?
Yeah, I mean, your point's well taken, Tony. I remember when in one of the public comments, someone had said something about impetigo. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
And I asked Dr. Marks, I said, have you seen a lot of impetigo? And she said, well, I've only seen one case maybe a couple of months ago. So, you know, sometimes we hear about certain trends, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's happening right here within our community. I was grateful for that, quite frankly. The other thing is that that's the weekly meeting with the health department. We have another weekly meeting. It's Tuesdays and Wednesdays. On Tuesday, we meet with all of the COVID liaisons, which are the assistant principals in every building. Mike Del Mastro also joins that meeting, the director of facilities, in case there's something that needs to be tended to. COVID, non-related to COVID, just to make sure that the supplies and the supply chain going to the schools is okay. And that's an important meeting as well. So that takes place every Tuesday at 2:00. Then we have our, I think it's Wednesday at 3 with Dr. Marks and Mark Cooper, even if it's only a 15-minute check-in, which we always seem to talk longer than 15 minutes. It's just really good to be able to have that check-in. The other thing I would say is that our team is really good at sharing information in an email, asking questions across buildings, reporting out what they're seeing and sharing. So I do feel very fortunate in that the team is on top of this.
Yeah. The other thing is, I'm glad you mentioned, and is that dealing with you know, I think one of the concerns, and I think a couple of board members had it, and I certainly have had it, is dealing with the more vulnerable of the population, whether the students are vulnerable or a family member is. And I'm glad that you mentioned that these are, you know, specific situations, and there's somewhere they can go in terms of figuring out exactly what we need to do with those students.
And the same thing, quite frankly, with the staff. We haven't received a lot of concerns. However, we take care of the staff and see what accommodations we could provide to make them feel comfortable, because some of them are anxious.
I have a quick question, Lisa,
Sure.
and actually I have a few questions. But one of the questions is, you know, you were talking about the meetings that you have every week. Just as a observation, I know, for example, two of my kids got COVID around the Christmas break time period, right? Luckily, everyone was fine. One of them was an in-school transmission not from the Weston schools, from a different school. And I did report it to the school, but I didn't report it. I thought about this later on. I never reported it to the health department that my kid got COVID. Nor did I, and my other child that got COVID was 22 years old, so there was no school to report it to. And again, I didn't report it to the health department. So my question is, how confident are we with the numbers that we're seeing from the health department and from the schools? Because a lot of people now with the in-home test, they get a positive test, and they're not necessarily reporting it. So how do we move forward? Because that's going to be a question I think that a lot of people are going to have. You know, how confident are we with these numbers? And along those lines, why is it that we're not opting to put solid numbers in place once we get to X percent? I can't even give it X percent of transmission in the community. We go back into masks. where are we as far as that's concerned? And I just, I think that sometimes it's easier to have a solid line. And I know you're trying to figure out what the line is, but is it, is it something that you are trying to do to put a solid line in place? If we get over 15% transmission, then yes, we're at, 15 is crazy high, but am I making sense with this question, or am I rambling too much? Sorry.
Yeah. Sharon, I think you are. If I could jump in for a second, because this is the exact question I asked, and obviously we're following our lead from public health and medical advisors. They are not giving, we're not going to make up a number because we just, we're not medical professionals, and we're not going to be given a number by public health. And I think if we were given a number or a range, we'd be happy to do it. In fact, but everyone is reluctant to give a number or to use one particular metric or another, because I don't think anyone is comfortable that they can stand behind one particular number from a scientific or medical perspective. But anyway, would love to have a number from our professionals who are advising us, and the state, but no one's giving us a number.
So then, with that being said, I know that we are talking about, if we find that there are cluster breakouts, et cetera, that we may have to revert back to masks. I think there's a potential we're going to get pushback from a group of parents saying that we can't enforce that. So how is it that can you explain that, I guess? How can we enforce masking based upon what?
Well, I think that, quite frankly, that's what the policy that you guys approved gives us the right to do, to determine how to operate the district in the most safe way. And what I would do, because I clearly am not a medical expert, is we would have conversations with the local health officials, with Dr. Marks. If we have to call someone at the state, then we call someone at the state to get their thoughts, because they still have calls regarding this, and to find out. Sometimes you have to, a lot of this can be contextual. For example, you might say, well, if this number in a classroom, we have to put masks on the classroom. You got to be careful with that. A preschool class can have 10 kids in it. First grade class can have 19 kids in it. English 9 class at the high school, and they mix all up and they're leaving the classrooms, could have 25 kids in it. So I think that there has to be some kind of a aspect where with good thinking, we have to make a decision. And look, I get it. This is a really emotional, personal issue for families. And we always will try to make the best decision in the situation that we're in, giving the context we're in. If we have roughly, and I don't want to misspeak on a number, because I unfortunately wrote a wrong number in an email once, a letter communication to the public about staff, that we have 358 staff. I think we're close to about 2,700 people in our district community. Does that sound right? About right, Mr. Cross? So you have 2,700, and then you compare that against the dashboard, and I forget what the current number is right now. I apologize. That also gives us some perspective. And where are they? What classes are they in? All of this has to factor into any decision. Sometimes you can get too bogged down in a specific number, and you also have to consider what the context is. I have asked repeatedly, what would the tipping point be? And as Tony says, there is not a solid commitment at this point by any health professional. I do think, though, if we start seeing things go up, then it behooves us to reflect on our practices and tweak accordingly.
Okay, now that makes total sense. I mean, we all wish for this magic number, without a doubt. I'm just trying to think of it. I mean, look, I'm thrilled that the kids aren't going to be wearing masks. I think we all are. But there's also a flip side of people who are really concerned. And I want to make sure that everyone can be as comfortable as possible, knowing that we're not just taking the masks off and throwing caution to the wind. We are really keeping an eye on it. And I was hoping that there would be some sort of a threshold. I think you are too. But I'm happy that we are just monitoring and trying to do our best. And again, I guess we need to make sure that we reinforce with the community that when there's a positive test, please report it kind of thing, making that as easy as possible. Actually, it's kind of interesting because I went to the department's website the other day to try to give my friend the link to report her case, and it was very difficult to find. But that aside, I have one more question about, sorry.
Sure. Let me answer the other question, though. I don't think I spoke to it, Sharon, and you're talking about the confidence in the numbers. I think, again, there's a couple of things that we have to remember there. If we go by right now, the numbers that our nurses have in our schools, that is not necessarily an active representation, for the very reason that many families are vaccinated and people leave busy lives, and they don't necessarily tell the school nurse if something has happened. That being said, they tell the school nurse, I'm sorry, that my child is homesick with COVID. They don't necessarily turn in their cards or send the cards to the school nurse. That's what we found, because the numbers can look lower within our numbers, and then you look outside at that age group in the community, and it's higher. So the other important thing is if someone isn't vaccinated and then they have COVID and have certain immunities, I guess is the right word, they're not going to show up in any numbers. At the same time, because they've gone through an illness, they are protected. Right now, thank you, Ms. Saketa, our student dashboard is 9 students out of the 2,000 plus are positive and 2 staff members are positive. That's a total of 11 out of 2,700 people. So we just have to keep watching and sending positive thoughts that people don't lower their guard clearly, and at the same time have a level of whatever their level of comfort is with these different metrics that we can provide them.
Sharon, you had another question? Oh.
If Sharon, I have a couple of questions if Sharon doesn't.
Go ahead, Dan.
Question, sorry, kicked out there. Thank you, Lisa. Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
The one last question?
Sure.
Okay. The one last question that I wanted to ask, Lisa, and this should be a quick one. For the students who are choosing to continue wearing masks, are we going to, especially for the younger kids, are we going to be still able to offer mask breaks? Did you guys hear that?
Yeah, we are still
sorry.
planning on having those breaks built into the day for everybody.
Great. That's my last question. David, take it away.
I have a couple of questions, especially I think for the younger kids. So for the families that choose for their child to continue to wear a mask, is there any way that they can indicate such either through the teacher or through the school? I understand that it would be difficult at best for the teacher to remind the student or police it, but for the parents who do prefer their student continue to wear a mask, is there some indication that the parent can provide to the school to just sort of alert the teacher or the administrator of the family's choice?
Lisa, I can respond to that. They can certainly always reach out to the classroom teacher. There's ongoing communication between the teacher and the parents. I do encourage, even at this young age, for families to start to lay the foundation for children advocating and speaking for themselves. It's certainly absolutely communication through the adults is important. And the way I often describe it to a parent is it's a great idea to give the teacher a heads up, and then also tell your child that they can let the teacher know, I'm choosing to, or my family is choosing to continue to wear masks. Great foundational skill for self-advocacy, which I know, we certainly encourage across the schools.
David,
can
I jump in for a second, David, just to make a suggestion? Is there any way you would consider, maybe not in the middle school, but in for the little ones who do have to wear masks, to create a buddy system? And that is that if there's more than one child that has a mask, that they're buddies and they remind each other to keep their masks on. I mean, something along those lines where you're just facilitating kind of the support network of those kids, or does that get complicated.
No,
I
it
would
is a little
defer, I would
tricky
defer
when
to
you,
Laura.
if you start at, yeah, it's a little tricky when you ask children to start policing each other. It's really not a best practice at the younger levels. You know, we really try to reinforce and set the climate that we're all buddies in the classroom and everybody supports everybody, regardless of if you have a mask on or don't have a mask on.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You know, similar to Patty's example earlier, we wouldn't want two children who wear glasses to, you know, be sitting next to each other, reminding each other to put their glasses on, because
Yeah, no,
that
you're
in and
totally
of
right.
itself kind of sets them apart
Yeah.
and draws attention to them where they may not want attention.
Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah.
But it does remind me though of, I am sure that if I know that if someone were struggling or a little child were struggling in that classroom, that the teacher would realize, and I am confident that one of those little children would reach out, or the teacher would make sure that they would reach out. I remember when I was in the class and they said, what do we do if, I think I gave the example before, if somebody's in the red? Oh, we would help them, let them go first and help them solve whatever problem it was. And I thought, my goodness, out of the mouth of a little 6-year-old is the best practice that our entire community should be following, you know, so.
Sorry, David, I know you had other questions.
That's okay. So I think that, you know, this is obviously the first real significant step in getting our kids back to, you know, some level of normalcy. Some of the other things I'm just curious if there's a timeline on is, I understand that kids, at least in the middle school, some eat lunch in the cafeteria and some eat lunch in the library. So there's still, I don't know what the right word would say, but is there a plan, you know, is there a plan in place or being put forward so that, you know, we take it to the next level of normalcy? Kids commingle throughout the day. They get to have lunch with, you know, I understand the experience of eating lunch in the library is quite different than the cafeteria. So is there a plan to, you know, what's the next step and when?
Lisa, do you want me to take that one? So I would say it's interesting that you bring that up, Dave, because we had the library media specialist brought that exact same question up with me today.
Probably wants them out, right?
Yep. And I mean, it's not really the best environment, you're right, for eating. And so, yeah, we're going to monitor, we want to take things slow. I think, you know, for this first phase of, you know, the next response to this pandemic as we move back towards normalcy is just the mask optional. And I think we'll monitor and, you know, we don't have a firm timeline, but that is our goal, to be moving back so that all students can be eating in the cafeteria. You know, they do mingle, they're out there all together for recess already. You know, so it's not like we're separating kids completely. They are mingling for their PFA classes as well. And in the hallways, they're passing at the same time. So it's, you know, it's been a little bit of a process, and we're going to continue moving in that direction, monitoring the situation. But we don't have a firm timeline right now.
What about, don't we also have opportunities to, not large scale, eat outside as the weather gets warmer at both the high
Absolutely.
school and the middle school tables? And so maybe we can, and oh yeah, that's right. I remember seeing the 5th grade outside, Patty. So that as the weather gets warmer, we can certainly look at making sure we have enough outdoor seating, because that would be great to be able to move them outside.
And we have students who have been choosing to eat outside pretty much all winter. It's amazing. The Polar Bear Club is what I call them.
And my last question is, you know, sort of like lead by example. So are there plans in place? You touched on them briefly, Lisa. What are there plans like in place with potential timelines to open our schools back up to the parents so that, you know, lead by example? Our kids know that we're doing things differently as well, even as we sit here today. So are there plans to, you know, get the parents back in to the front doors of the schools and have them participate more like the good old days?
I would say that for the month of March, the plan is to go through the month of March, make sure that we can have our parent conferences, giving them the choice. I anticipate also moving to to sending that out again in a communication, as well as if parents choose to have all PPTs are virtual by default, I would say, because we found that that actually works very well for parents. However, we would like to move forward with being able to say if a parent chooses to have an in-person PPT, that would also be happening probably around the same time as we're looking for the conferences. And then looking at the beginning of April, you know, again, we have these transitions coming as far as you know, I'm thinking of parents wanting to see schools, different things like that. I know that at the elementary school, especially in kindergarten, parents want to come in. We have to think about the best way to start opening that up again for tours at different levels, kind of one step at a time. I do not envision keeping the doors shut, quite frankly, through June. We can't do that. I think that we get through the next 2 to 3 weeks. Opening it up for those conferences and those PPTs is a huge first step. And then looking at how that goes and then moving forward with it. You know, I can't say, okay, by April 1st, we're going to let all the volunteers back in. I don't think that. I don't want to say something that might not happen, but know that we're very conscious of the fact that people want to come back in the buildings. We want people to be in the buildings, especially families that have not been in some of these buildings, and it is important. The athletics, again, well, most of the sports are going to be now outside, but you know, people come in for the sports events. We're going to have the spring musical. So all of those things moving forward is little by small, feeling more and more comfortable about letting people in.
Thank you.
I have a question. For the students who may need to be on a long-term remote learning situation due to family or medical situations, is there a plan or a strategy to address some of the isolations and limitations of remote learning that they may experience?
I think that it's a great question, Bernie. We really look at individual students and see what, and families, and see how we can accommodate that. I do have to say, full disclosure, I told Miss Edwards not to come to the meeting tonight because she had things that she had to tend to and was at the meeting last night. So now I feel a little bit like she probably would also want to speak to this so we can follow up with this again at our next meeting. But it really depends on, I think, the individual family. You know, if we can't say, well, you could participate in the play, for example, because that would make you feel more comfortable. That's a slippery slope because there's 100 kids that are participating in the play. I think we have to be conscious of what the level of comfortability is with that family, and who is that family's support network, if you will. I mean, I think our counselors and our PBS staff, psychologists, social workers are really good at figuring that out. And of course, if there's any way that we can facilitate that, because we don't want children to feel isolated. We don't want them to feel alone, if you will. That's not what we're about. So I will make a note to also follow up, and we can provide some more information at our March update with that, as well as how many, you know, quantitatively, how many kids are we talking about? Because it is important.
Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments, questions? If I actually, I'm going to put Peter Gordon on the spot here because he and I have had a conversation about airborne viruses. It's what's like in his wheelhouse, and just generally, just the whole issue, because we had a really great conversation about, you know, fitting schools with different things, just to make the environment, you know, healthier and safer generally for our students. And I don't know, Peter, you had some thoughts of maybe things we should be considering or working on in the future, just to even, you know, it's not only COVID, but it just enhances the learning environment as you know.
Okay, I wasn't entirely prepared to talk about that, but certainly thank you for the moment. But let me just digress for a second because I really enjoyed the discussion. In my mind, how do I encompass all this? And today I decided to wear, and you can't see in the camera, my Smokey the Bear t-shirt, right? Because, it's sort of like we're doing forest management here, right? And we have vigilance, we have response to flare-ups, we even looking forward to sprouts of new trees, right? So it's a Smokey the Bear moment. It may not be the perfect analogy, but I think it's understood. So I applaud all the effort here. But to get down to the question at hand, I liked, and I think Sharon introduced this and Melissa in the past, how do we create not only a baseline of safety, but sort of an enhancement of safety? Because I think that sells the district very well. And I like the idea, I think it was raised that there's some HEPA filters for pre-K. They have their benefits and their drawbacks. And, I think we're on something here where we can think really deeply about sort of these zones of safety. If you have a particularly susceptible staff member or student, there are, for example, ultraviolet light capabilities that are very localized to a person or a desk, right? I mean, you have the ability to really protect a individual, and it's not a privilege. It's not like we're doing this particularly and they get extra treatment. It's just an enhancement, and maybe that's a way of assuaging concerns for those parents or those children or staff members. So like, look, I need a little more than the baseline. And we have access to that. I have access to that immediately. So I think we can give some thought in the short term to how do we create a little zone for that one or two students. I mean, we have immune compromised students. We have some teachers that are concerned about this, and clearly the parents. And it's transferable, right? So we can transfer it class to class, class to library, class to lunchroom, and it doesn't tie us down to any changes in facilities in the future. So that's what Tony and I talked about. But I think there's technology out there that's accessible immediately that we can create this little enhancement. And I think, it doesn't show that anything, but we're thinking a little over the horizon too, like a little more beyond the baseline. And we're also thinking about futures when there's stomach flu or, H1N1 airborne pathogens. And if we're smart about it, maybe do a little surface treatment and we can try to cut down on strep too. I mean, these are all the things that plagued us in our student community in February 2020, 2 years ago. We didn't wear masks, but we suffered through strep and flu that February. So that was what Tony and I talked about, but that's clearly available to us. And I don't think, I want to put a stake in the ground. I don't think it's particularly costly. I mean, it may be zero cost except for installation if we're smart about how we approach the suppliers. Mm-hmm. So that's what we had covered. So beyond my Smokey the Bear analogy, I wanted to give you some nuts and bolts.
I love the Smokey the Bear analogy, actually. But maybe that's something, Lisa and Peter and Phil, if there's something there to do, maybe we should take advantage of it. But I thought the conversation was interesting.
Yeah. Well, I have a conversation tomorrow morning with a supplier. And let me see if I can get us some gear.
That would be great.
That Mike can put in with instantly with a mounting bracket and a plug into the wall, and you're just head and shoulders above our Durga, right? You're just adding another layer that's just remarkable insight. So let me have that call tomorrow, and I'll get back to you guys, you folks.
All right, great, thank you. Anything? Any other board member with comments or questions?
Guess the only other thing is just for those parents that are, disappointed in this outcome. Most, I think, are really pleased with the outcome, but for those who are worried about their kids, I think steady updates from Lisa and the heads of schools to parents too, to say, there's a lot of good spirit going on, and there's a lot of, just reassurance, I think, for all parents, no matter what side of the fence they're on this issue. And whether that's, school-wide letters or an invitation for parents to call, I just think we should
Sure.
really,
Well, our update is going out tomorrow, correct, Ms. Saketa, that all the principals worked on, full of cheerful news. But I agree, Taffy, the more that parents can see different things, know different things. I encourage you to follow Instagram. We try to put a lot of pictures on there to show the joy that is happening in our district. I think it's all reassuring, and we are committed to providing timely information about what is going on, because there are people that are concerned. So
yeah, I think the point is that you are the observers of the children. You are the observers of how this is working or not working. And, sorry, Smokey the Bear, but here's another analogy. When we're in vegetable gardens and we, email the client before they email us. When we email them and say, we were in your garden today, the tomatoes are beautiful, the peas are ready for harvesting, the basil doesn't look good, so I pulled it and I'm replacing it. When we get ahead of it like that, and then, because if they're writing to us and saying, I know you were here, but the basil's dead, what happened? It's a much different dynamic. So I think as observers of these children that we're helping to grow, if we can be ahead of it, and really be the observers of both the good news and the bad news, I think the families will really appreciate it.
Great. By the way, do you charge them for the new basil?
No, we don't.
Oh, okay. Just in case you had some gardeners listening in. Anything else? Great. Thank you for all the hard work. I think that this is that inflection point, and this is not the end. This is maybe the beginning of the end. And
Mr. Churchill, yeah.
And so and we have to keep our eyes on everything, like Taffy said, and we will. But I appreciate all the hard work Lisa and the administration has done to pull this together. The state has been very slow in coming, and hopefully, thank the parents for their patience, because it's been a tough road over the last 2 weeks, waiting for the state authorities to give us some guidance on this.
yes.
So, but if there's nothing else, have a motion to adjourn this evening?
Move to adjourn.
Second?
I second.
Great. Okay, meeting adjourned. Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody.
Thank you very